awful thing. So I thought to start with, I would share some of the ways that I get round this. So the first one is, I'm sure some of you know the Thelwell cartoons from years ago. My daughter used to love them. And this was the inspiration for this shot. This is little Sophie, who was 6 years old, on her fat little Shetland pony. And then I find taking pictures of men quite difficult because to get that intense look. But I really love this photograph of Robert Pattinson. And I tried to recreate it here with Neil, who was one of Rob's PhD students a few years ago with, I think it's Prague in the background, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah.
I think it is anyway. And then Sherlock Holmes, we all know him. And this image here just had to be taken. I'm sure you'll recognize this person over here on the right-hand side is Robert. And the other one is his friend, James from Ireland. He was holding the lantern, yeah. They were at the bottom of our garden, just being 16-year-olds. They're terrible once they get together. And the back is somewhere in London. I can't remember where. The Flower Hall. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And then the next one, we have a friend in a local photographic club who wanted, as he called it, a very funky matrix picture. So I found this and he came round for the shoot. And this is the one that I did especially for him. In fact, Barry, those flames are from the chimney outside. And then this is a Gentleman Jack picture that I took with me to a shoot that I went to. And this is the image that I produced from that one. You'll see this guy a little bit later on. And of course, we all know Merlin, and this is my Merlin picture that did really well for me. I'm sure some of you will recognize Graham Curry. He came round for some portraits that we were doing for him, and I bought all this gear, and I tried another couple of people for the Merlin shots, but they didn't work. And the only thing that Graham bought, he bought that stick-on beard, Rob, and the moustache. We put all the gear that I'd bought and went out to some local ruins, and it worked really well for me. And then another bit of fun is action movies. You know, when we're watching movies on the telly, I'm always saying, stop, let me take a picture with my iPhone. I really like that. So I wanted to reproduce that kind of thing. And this was a guy called Robert that came round. He was a professional model and he wanted to come round for some silly images, and he knew who to come to for that. I'm actually up in the attic and I'm holding that, or I'm not holding it, it was tied actually, piece of rope, and he's holding the end of it. And his feet are actually touching the floor, but he's got a really good face there. And the background was an iPhone image through the window of a hotel when we were in Hong Kong years ago. And this is the last one. And it's basically just to say that when a model's boyfriend comes round to pick her up, there's only one thing you can do, and that's shoot him. And that's what happened here. When he came to pick Jasmine up, I said, right, you're definitely going to be in my photograph. So I shall just close that down, stop sharing for a second, just to make sure it works properly. And escape. And I shall open the next one for you. And then while it's opening, I'll just tell you a little bit about me. Just press play. Right, so I first picked up a camera in 2012, and I tried various genres of photography, as we all do to start with, but I really found that I lack the patience for anything to do with nature photography. And we both like our bed too much for landscapes. We just couldn't get up early in the morning. We just go, nah, we'll stay in bed. But I did like people in my images. So even though I carried on trying now and again, and I still do different genres, slowly I began to notice that my style was starting to emerge. So I thought I'd share some of the thought processes in taking and creating my images in the 3 different areas, which are closely linked by people. And that's portraits, myths, and fairy tales. So the first one is portraits. And this is called The Changeling, and it's of the beautiful Ellie. I've taken lots of images of her. She always looks beautiful, even in a bin bag, as we used to say. She's really, really lovely. But in this image, we were playing with gels at the time, and I wanted her to look really strong and fierce and almost warlike for a change, rather than the pretty, pretty pictures. So the twig headdress and the shoulder thing I had made by a local florist. And then during the shoot, I just told her to glare at me and lean slightly forward, almost in an intimidating way. And of course, as you can maybe make out there, I gave her fairy ears in Liquify. And the next one's called Longing. And this is Holly, and the original was taken outside. And I asked her to lean on this pillar and look wistfully off in the distance as if she was daydreaming, really. But when I got home, I didn't like the original background. It didn't work for me. It was too busy, and I don't think backgrounds should be busy. So all I did was I cut Holly and the pillar out, and then I blurred the background lots and added a couple of textures, and then simply pasted her back as the top layer afterwards. And it works much better. You focus on her rather than the busy background. And this was the gender neutral shoot that I went on, and this is Tobias. You saw him earlier dressed as Gentleman Jack, and in this one he's dressed in this beautiful ball gown that was just enormous. It dominated everything. I called it Stradivarius because in the studio I found this old violin shoved in the corner. So I really wanted to show a softness in this image and an acceptance and the pride of Tobias. He's just lovely. But in my portraiture, I really like to kind of evoke some kind of emotion rather than just a snap of someone. And I think you'll see from especially this image here called Melancholia. And this is Angie Sutcliffe, who's an actress, and she does lots of modelling as well. But she can change her expression effortlessly. She's really, really good. And here I wanted, I asked her to hold the book to her heart and just look off as if she's thinking of something really sad, maybe a long lost love. And she pulled it off greatly. And just before I clicked and afterwards, we burst into laughing, didn't we, Rob? We were just so much fun. But she's really professional. She can really get the look that you ask. And this is one called Pearl. I only finished it a couple of days ago, but I threw it into this talk. And again, it's the gorgeous Georgia, is she 15 now, I think? Yeah. And as Robert said, she lives locally, only about 10 minutes away, and she just loves coming to have her picture taken. And you'll see lots and lots of her. You saw lots in Robert's, and you'll see lots in mine. She seems to feature quite a lot, especially in the next few. And these next set of images were inspired really by a movie that we watched called Tulip Fever. And my mind was whirling away while we were watching, thinking I'm going to have to buy tulips. I'm going to have to find a model, and the costumes would be really, really important. So the tulips came from Amazon, and of course, Georgia was always a willing model. But then these authentic costumes were going to be a problem. The pictures just wouldn't look right without them. And as sometimes happens in life, a complete coincidence, we were offered to purchase several beautiful historic gowns just before the shoot. And Georgia's mum came along, and this is her iPhone picture. While I was setting the white balance, she just likes to take the behind the scenes picture. And the last one from this set is just the silliness that goes on during our shoots. And all we do is laugh and giggle. It's a wonder, really, that we get any pictures that aren't blurry. So again, I'll just stop sharing that just to make sure it's all going to work. Escape. We're going to do some live photoshopping in a minute. But first, I'm just going to chat to you about myths. This is very quick. If it works, there we are. So I'm sure some of you know that I'm really interested in mythology. We have lots of books on that in the house. And this is an image that I called Sleepy Hollow. And it's actually very, very simply done, as I'll show you. This was the shoot we were on with a lovely Jade Lyon, who happened to be up on holiday. She's actually a professional model down in London, but she was up on Anglesey on holiday, and she asked if we'd like a shoot. So here she is, just sitting on some rocks on a local beach, and I asked her to put her feet in the water just so that they'd look a bit glistening in the picture, and then just to look deep into the sea there as if she's deep in thought. I hadn't really got an idea what I was going to do with this. This is one of those times where you just have to go with the flow on the shoot. Then when I was at home, I wanted to start processing. And I thought it needed a really mysterious, mythical kind of background. And this is the background that I used. It's in the lagoons in Llanberis, which is about half an hour's drive from where we live here in North Wales. Great place for backgrounds. But the background needed to complement the story that I was trying to tell, maybe be darker than the foreground and slightly out of focus with just a hint of the context. And here it is. I've just added a small amount of mist into it. Robert will be smiling because he says I'm obsessed with mist, but you will not, I'm not going to show them how to make mist today, Rob. That's in another talk. So here it is. All you have to make sure is that the colour palettes are complementary to each other. Cool. So now we're going to do some live photoshopping, hopefully. Escape out of that and open my quick little PowerPoint first, just to explain what it's all about. So this is about making backgrounds, because it happens to me quite often. Nothing in my background folder will work. So I end up making a background. And here on the shoot, Holly is a bit of a tomboy, and she climbed up onto this kind of bit of a tree branch. And she said, make me into a fairy high up in a tree. So you know what the model wants, the model gets. So here is the background that I made. I'm going to make it live with you in a couple of seconds. I put some trees from Conwy Morfa into it, and then cut out Holly, added fairy wings and a crown. And she had what she wanted, basically. But I make lots and lots of these backgrounds while I'm watching the telly in the evening. And then I have a folder on my hard drive full of backgrounds, so that when I'm inspired to do something, they're just there ready. So I shall stop sharing again, escape, and this time open Photoshop. Share screen. Here we are. So I'm going to make this background live for you. So this is an image of Dubrovnik. I always use holiday snaps to do this. Not a very good picture of Dubrovnik. And the fort there is just black, but we'll soon get rid of that. So the first thing I'm going to do is Command J to open a new layer. I work on a PC, by the way.
You work on a Mac.
On a Mac, sorry. So it's Command J to do a new layer, and I think it's Control J on the PC. And what I'm going to do is I'm just roughly going to get the clone stamp tool. And I'm just going to get rid, basically, of, come on, it's not playing. Hope Photoshop's going to work.
What's it doing?
I don't know it. I'll use the patch tool instead. It's just playing up a bit, but we just vaguely need to get rid of this horrible fort here. I'll try the clone tool once more to see if it'll work for me. No. Oh, there we are. It's working now. And I'm just roughly, as you can see, getting rid of the fort. Really rough, it doesn't matter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going up to filter, down to blur and Gaussian blur. And I'm going to Gaussian blur this by lots, because all I want is the lovely colors. Just do it slowly. Probably around there would be fine. I think that's quite good. And accept that. There we are. So I quite like that to start with. Now it needs some sky, and I've got some sky images here. I'm always taking pictures of sky. I have a dark sky folder and a pale sky folder, and this is how I do them. I can just show you. I'll add a new layer, and I go to the gradient tool, make sure that it's black on the foreground and white on the background. And up here, it's on foreground to transparent on this first one. And then all you have to do is, that wasn't very good, was it? We're going this way up. That would be a really good idea, wouldn't it, Rob? Yeah. Here we are. Adding a layer mask first would be a really good thing, as Robert said. And then just dragging up, slowly getting rid of the bottom bit, which you don't want. And then you just end up with a really nice sky that you can transfer onto a picture. But I don't think I'll use that one. I think I used this one in the image that I'm talking about. So you can cut and paste, but I use this move tool. So click on the move tool and drag that sky over the image. And you can actually place it wherever you like. I'd have it about there. And I think that's starting to look now like a bit of a landscape with what I wanted. And you can also play with the opacity tool to bring it down slightly, but I like it quite dark. And then the other thing, I think the top of this image is now it's just too bright. So I'm going to add a new layer. And again, I play with the gradient tool, black to white, and draw downwards. And then you get a nice dark top, which just blends in slowly. And then you can just bring the opacity down until it's where you want it. So that's how I make lots and lots and lots of my images. And if I close that one down and show you hanging around again, you can see there's the original flipped, and that's the sky that I used for Holly. So I'll just close all that down again. Don't save. And stop sharing for a second while I find you something else. Close down what we don't need here would be really good. Right, fairy tales. Share screen. Here we are. So I've also got a bit of a fascination about fairy tales, to be honest, and it's worked out really well because lots of these professional models come for nothing and they readily volunteer because lots of people will have them in the studio and do the beautiful images of them. But what I do and what Robert does, they really, really like. They love being turned into elves or fairies or pixies. So it's actually really useful for me. And this is the first one, and guess who? It's Georgia again, isn't it? That's the finished image. But this is the image, the straight image from the camera. And as you can see, her ears aren't showing enough. There's not enough for me to make pixie ears there. So I cut some ears from another picture and put them in. And the other thing you'll see if I go back is she's now got really nice catch lights in her eyes. Now, the way to do catch lights in our house is Robert's eyes. He's got dark brown eyes. We're always sitting at the dining room table. We've got leaded windows. And I say, don't move. I have to go and get my camera because I get lovely, lovely catch lights from his eyes. So make a friend of someone with that, dark brown eyes and steal the catch lights. They're great. And then all I've done from that to make that really is use the liquify, and I've made her mouth very small, made her eyes big, and then I've liquefied her ears out to make her look like a pixie. I called this image Faye, I think. And this is Arwen, and this was a young model called Keone who came to spend the day with us. And again, this is the straight out of camera image, as you can see in our studio. I put a fairy dress on her, covered her in lots of tulle, and went outside to the front garden and cut these flowers and arranged them around her. And then in the final image, I put some swan wings on her and then went into the back garden to get the other flowers. Now, you will notice that she's got some makeup on in this, but I always add makeup digitally afterwards. I mean, they'd look awful if I put makeup on them anyway. And we don't like models turning up with too much makeup because it restricts what you can put them in. So all that makeup was put on afterwards. And the last one is the land of make-believe. And this is Danny Elowin, who featured in one of your images. Oh, that's right, the one that span round, yeah. And this is an internationally created image, as I like to call it, because there's 5 images used from around the world. And this is the first one. And this is Danny in England, sitting in a ruin near Manchester. And I remember that day well, because it poured with rain. The poor thing, she's actually soaked to the skin there. And we had wolf dogs with us, a pack of wolf dogs, and they weren't bothered by the rain, but we were soaked. And then this is the image of the castle. It's Rydlan Castle in North Wales. And I focused here so that I knew I'd be putting her sitting on these rocks on the corner on the right-hand side there, just so that the focal plane would be right. And then in the finished image, we have the sky from Colwyn Bay in Wales, the mountains played about with slightly, but that's an Irish landscape, and then the sea is from New Zealand. Cool, so I shall now stop sharing again because we're going to do some live photoshopping again, which is the thing that you have to hold your breath with in Zoom talks, but we'll get there, I'm sure. Yay. Right, I shall share again. Okay, so as I said, I'm not going to cover things that we've done in other talks like shadows, blending and making mist. Robert will be really glad to hear that because he tells everybody I'm obsessed with mist, but there's no mist here, Rob. But this one I wanted to include because a lot of people ask about it, and I think it's really, really important. And it's about the fact of being able to match colours from your background image to your model that fits in the image, especially as in this one. This is Kappa Cross in Ireland. And I've specifically chosen this one because it's quite orange. So I might have an outside image that looks like this for my background, but the inside image of the model maybe will have been taken in a studio and the colors just don't fit properly together without some tweaking. There's lots of ways of doing this, really important to do in composite photography, I think, but this is the way that I do it. And I think it's, anyway, the easiest way to do it. Just make it slightly smaller so we can see what we're doing. So this is Kappa Cross, as I said, and this is Emma in the studio. Here's the original, there you go. And I cut her out and I'm going to move her with the move tool again, dragging her into Kappa Cross. Just make this smaller so I can make her smaller. Now, as I said, I'm not going to add shadows or do proportions or anything because we've covered that before, but we'll just put her there and we'll put it in the orange light so that you can see what I mean. So she just doesn't look right in that picture. And the quickest way to sort that out is make sure that you're on your background layer, Command J again, or Control J on a PC to copy the background layer and then drag that over her. And obviously she completely disappears. So I'm just going to put average because I always name my layers. If I've got 50 or 100 in a big composite, you really forget what that layer is unless you give it a title. All I'm going to do now is on that layer I've called average, I'm going up to filter, down to blur and across to average. And what it does is it blends all the colors in that background image together. If they were paint and you swizzle them about with a brush, you'd end up with this color. So this is the average color of your photograph, your background photograph. Now we're going to add a clipping mask, which sounds really complicated, but it's not at all. You can actually go up, I'm not sure where, in layer there, you can go up there to clipping mask. But what I like to do on a Mac is just hold Option down and click between them. And as you can see, what a clipping mask has done is clipped that average brown just onto the image of the model. Now you need to go play with the blending modes and go from normal almost all the way down to the bottom to color. And now it's just colored her that brown color. And all you then have to do is remember to stay on the average layer, just lower the opacity. I normally take it all the way down to about 25. And then I just play about till there's one that I like. That'll do. I think about 39 will do. And she fits in there much better than she did before. Now that normally works. You don't have to do anything else. But what you can do, you can add a layer mask because I quite like that orangeness behind it. So I've added a layer mask. I'm going to press B to bring up my brushes. My right square bracket key makes the brush bigger and my left square bracket key makes the brush smaller. So we'll have one about that size and then I'll bring the opacity down to maybe about halfway to start with, and zoom in slightly. And what I'm going to do is just paint down where that sun would be just highlighting little bits of her. So just slowly put it in, maybe down the dress a little bit as well. And that just makes a difference to bring a slight amount of orange to her skin, just where the sun will be shining on her. So that's that one finished. Don't save, and close that one down as well. And close it. I think that's the last that we do in Photoshop. So I'll stop sharing Photoshop, and now I'm going to do a PowerPoint for you, and it's how I created something from the very start to the very finish. And it's called Wild Friends. And it's Emma again, who happened to be in the last one. And it's my workflow and thinking all the way through. The only idea I had with a model in the studio was that I wanted her sitting down and there'd be animals somewhere around her. I hadn't got anything else in mind. So here she is. All I did was make sure that her dress was completely covering the stool that she was sitting on. As I said, because I had no firm idea where this was going, I asked her to hold her hand out because I thought I would put a bird perched somewhere on her hand. And the other hand, I said, just hold it on your knee because I'm going to put something on your knee, probably a cat. I don't quite know. And this was a visitor to our garden. As I said, we're not nature photographers, but I quite often, and so does Robert, want some birds in our picture. So this kind of made up perch goes in the garden now and again when we're looking for a bird. And here is that very same bird cut out and added to her hand. And then in this layer, I added a shadow just underneath, just slightly underneath the bird's foot. And then, as I said, initially, I thought I would have a cat on a knee. And then I remembered this little fellow. I'm not sure if it was a girl or a boy, actually. But we took it in Wild Island, which is, where is it in Donegal? Donegal, okay, great place. If you're ever in Donegal, go to Wild Island. It's fab. And this fox are very near, but it didn't do anything. It came out and we thought, oh, great. And then it curled up into a ball and fell asleep. And those are the only pictures that I had of it, but it was perfect for what I needed. So I popped it in here, obviously cut it out and popped it onto Emma's lap. And then I painted away the fox's body so that it revealed her hand holding it on her knee. And then obviously the fox had to have a shadow behind and underneath it. And lastly here, I used the Nick detail extractor just to bring out some details in her hair and the dress. And now it was ready for cutting out and adding to a background. And this again is one of the backgrounds that I created a while ago. It's 3 or 4 different backgrounds all blended together. I like the sky, but I didn't really need the bottom bit. So what I did here was I used the gradient tool, as I showed you earlier, and just blended away the bottom bit. It works much better than brushing it away with a brush because it gives a nice gradual fading out. And then the bottom I put in was an image of the Denby Moors when we were up there years ago, I think, when the heathers were actually out. And then some rocks, because she'd have to be sitting on something. And then I added some really strong shadows under the rocks to start with. I didn't know what she would look like in this picture and what she would cover, but remember that those shadows were on their own separate layer, so I could reduce the opacity or even get rid of them if I needed to. And then, boom, the studio image went in, and she covers nearly all the rocks, so I just left the shadows as they were. I think they worked quite well. Then I did a dodge and burn layer. I do use dodging and burning quite often in nearly all of my composites. And it was just to emphasize the darkness and the lightness in the fabric, and then adding a slight shadows behind Emma as well. And then up on the right-hand side, you can see my bird brush. I used this brush in lots of images. We were walking along the beach in Colwyn Bay one day, and it's just a picture of some birds way off in the distance that I actually took with my iPhone. And then the next thing that I did was slightly use the gradient tool to bring some more light into her face. I like using the raw gradient tool to do this. All you do is up the exposure slightly, and I think it gives a really nice gradual kind of light into people's faces. And then I added a vignette just to kind of bring your eye right down onto Emma and the animals. So that's me almost finished. I'm just going to find a movie for you. And I thought that I would show you my MPAGB panel. And basically it's I wanted to show this because there's a theme going all the way through. What's nice about MPAGB is the theme in this one really is Robert. I have to say, bless him. He's looking. It doesn't have to be. I'm going to explain that. The theme is you in this one because he always makes my movies for me. So Robert always makes them, and the music from them comes from a friend of Robert's who he met when they were at university in Trinity College, Dublin, and he has the Liffey Light Orchestra as well as being a barrister as well, doesn't he? But what's nice, lots of the other panels that I made had to have a story and a theme that ran all the way through them. But for PAGB, they don't actually have to. Each one is looked at individually, all mixed up with everybody else's images as they go up. But lots of the pictures that I use today, I will have talked about in my talk. So I'll just press play and let you listen to it. There we are. I shall stop sharing and then you're going to come in, Rob.
Okay, yep.
Finished.
Sharon, that was absolutely moving, nearly brought tears to my eyes. That was absolutely gorgeous. All of your photos have been, both you and Rob, have been absolute perfection and a joy to look at. And I'm sure we've all been left motivated and inspired to try out creative photography. I'll open the floor to any questions to everyone, please.
You want to look in the chat room if there's anything?
I think she.
There are no questions in the chat room. I thought maybe people would just address them directly.
I think people look at people.
I think we're all just stunned. We're just in awe.
Yeah, Photoshop shocked.
Some of your panel were composites, but some were also direct shots, weren't they, Sharon?
But they always have people in. That's what I've discovered.
Yes.
Yeah. I really like portraiture as well. I've been on a bit of a roll on portraiture lately, haven't I? Yeah. If you're on Facebook, then you'll find me. Robert's not on Facebook because he's a dinosaur, but I am. So if you just look for Sharon Prenton Jones, you'll and ask me for a friend request, then you can see lots more of what I've been doing lately, really.
Right. I'm one of those dinosaurs, unfortunately.
So am I.
Yeah,
I'm in good company here.
Yeah.
Us fellow,
Yeah.
all going extinct together.
As an ex-teacher, I don't want to be particularly in contact with quite a few of the people I taught many years ago.
Yeah, well, that was Robert's problem as well. While he was working, you couldn't, could you?
No,
So,
I was a clinical psychologist in the NHS, so you don't want to be found by lots of
All
people.
right.
but also, I only use it for our photography. I don't use it for our lives.
The sort of secondary school I worked in, we probably created a number of your clients.
And I.
That's
We certainly had quite a few that went on to become visitors of HMP Prison Bristol up the road from here.
If there are no questions, I'm just going to have to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this presentation this morning. We really, truly enjoyed it, I'm sure. Everyone must agree.
Thank you for asking us. It was cool.
No, it's our pleasure. Our pleasure. Thank you very much. And there's only one thing with Zoom. We can't clap, but we can virtually clap.
We can do the performing seal trick.
Nice to meet you all anyway.
Okay. Nice seeing you. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Hello, David.